Hello everyone, I'm Tim from Tim's PC and I build custom PCs to suit anyone's needs or budget. Also live stream my builds and repairs for transparency and educational purposes. So if you would like to get an awesome new PC and you'd like to see it put together live, send me a message today. Alrighty, so we're back here once again, building another PC. So tonight we're going to be building a PC for Allan. He's a local here in Brisbane, so he's actually peeling out of his skin to get this PC right now. So he'll be picking this one up tomorrow, provided we don't have any dead on arrival parts. So Allan first hit me up probably over a month ago for this PC, and it's all finally happening. So it's always a big, like, I do them every night. It's easy for me just to go, oh, yeah, it's just another PC, but like when someone's buying it, they're genuinely really excited for it, and they've usually had to save up for it for quite a bit of time. So anyway, let's get stuck right into it. So we've got the Ryzen 5700x. So this is a CPU we haven't featured here before. It's a relatively newly released CPU. It's basically, from what I can see, it's a relatively similar chip to the 5700G. But without the G, instead it has the X, so it doesn't have onboard graphics, and I think it's clocked slightly higher than the G, so better option for gamers, definitely. And I think it worked out $20 or $30 cheaper, so yeah, that's always a win, right? And so we're going to be putting it on the MSI B550M Pro VDH Wi-Fi motherboard. We've got 32 gigabytes of Corsair Vengeance RGB, 3200 megahertz CL16 memory. And I think we got a 1 terabyte SSD. We've got a 4 terabyte hard drive. We've got a RTX 3060 gigabyte gaming OC. We've got the Gigabyte 750 watt 80 plus gold power supply there. It's got a 5-year warranty on it. And speaking of 5-year warranties, we have the Corsair cooler here. So Corsair have 5-year warranty on all their coolers. So you'll pay a little bit more for it, but at least you get the peace of mind of a long warranty. Because a lot of cheap ones will only have like a 12-month warranty, which is fine, but sometimes people want to buy a PC and they don't want to have to worry about it, like, you know, in the 1 to 3 year period. They'd like to make sure that, you know, at least for 3 years, sort of nothing goes wrong. If you're on a budget, you're on a budget. But like, if the budget permits, we'll always use a Corsair cooler here. So I'll just get that one out of the box prematurely, or out of the plastic wrap, I should say. But yeah, let's get started. So I'll get this one out of the way. Actually, it looks like that wasn't a 1 terabyte, that's a 2 terabyte SSD here, just for reference. And yeah, that is a 32 gigabyte kit. Alrighty. So yeah, like I said, this is sort of the new product being featured here tonight. I don't want to say that it's like new or anything like that. It's certainly not brand new, but it's new enough that I haven't used one in a build yet. So we'll get to see how that performs exactly and how it stacks up between between it and its competitors mainly. Because it doesn't really matter how it performs compared to, you know, something from 3 years ago, right? Of course it's going to be better than that. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't perform as well as a CPU that costs twice as much as it either, because that's two different buyers as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, so as I said, we've got our old friend here, the MSI B550 Pro VDH Wi-Fi motherboard. Really good price performance motherboard. It's got all the right features in the right places. It's got a USB Type-C header. It's got dual M2. It's got 2 5-volt RGB headers, 5 PWM fan headers, and it's got built-in Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, dual channel memory. It's got all the things that you would want. And what I like about it is that I don't have to go, oh shit, cheaper motherboard. Can I still run my Ryzen 9 in here? Yeah, you can, absolutely. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing any extreme overclocking on this, but you can run your Ryzen 9. It's not gonna overheat the MOSFET and VRM. It's not gonna cause the computer to crash or anything like that, like what you can see on cheaper boards. So this board here represents pretty much the sweet spot for price performance for an AMD AM4 B550 chipset motherboard. So, what's up?
Female says, ahoy hoy to Christine. Do you have your butthurt report forms ready for this stream? I like your mum didn't hug me enough option.
the butthurt report, yeah, that would be fun. That would be kind of fun. I guess like the more subscribers and the more viewers that we get with the live streams, the more like outraged people are gonna be like triggered by something that I'm doing. And I guess that just gets to be fun for everyone, right? Like I said to Christine, I'm like, don't ban him, let him continue to run his mouth. It'll just give me funny things to say about it. Anyway, so there's our CPU. We don't get a cooler with this CPU.
Man, he's
Just in timeout. Oh well. So yeah, they don't include a cooler with it. So if you do buy this CPU, you do need to go and actually get a proper cooler for it. Because obviously what they're saying is that it just gets too hot pretty much no matter what you do if it's got the stock cooler on it. That's why the company won't include it. Like, yeah, it sort of seems obvious, but like not everyone's all over this sort of stuff. Like there was a guy recently, he had a really old computer that he bought on eBay that he thought was like a lot more modern than it actually was. And then he buys like a brand new Gen 4 PCIe graphics card to go in it, and it won't work in that older motherboard. There's no way around that, as far as I know. And if there is, it's probably not something that you really want to pursue, because there'd probably be some sort of caveat to it. But anyway, he ended up buying a CPU off eBay, thinking that he could just upgrade this other CPU cooler that was already on the board. And no, he'd bought a CPU that he didn't even have a cooler, and that I couldn't put an ordinary stock cooler on. And so what he thought was a good thing to buy, he ended up paying twice as much for. Then he found out that he needed to spend another $50 on a cooler, because I needed to put at least a certain like wattage capacity cooler on the i7-11700K that he bought. I told him to get an 11400F, but he like went online and read some review saying that chip was shit, and it's not shit. It's shit when you compare it to like a Ryzen 5600X or something like that. But a 5600X is like another $150 more than that. So it's not really the same thing to compare them. There's quite a big difference in price there, and if you're on a budget, you're getting 90 to 95% of the performance in gaming from the 11400F versus the 5600F. So if you're on a tight budget, you can get pretty much all the performance of that chip for like $150 less. So it's not a piece of shit. Objectively, it is not a piece of shit. You can say anything's a piece of shit when you go and like fiddle with the comparisons, right? You know, we could go and compare like the Ford Model T, like the first production automobile, right? We can go and compare that with some car in the 60s, right? We'd be comparing a car in the 30s with the car in the 60s. Of course, the car in the 30s is not going to stack up. It's not going to be quite as good as that one in the 60s. There's 30 years of engineering between those two products. But yeah, anyway, I'm just going off on a rant. If you don't stop me, I'll keep going forever. I don't want to liken myself to Richard Feynman, but I kind of go off on rants like him. If you ever heard any extended dialogue with that guy, he is a much greater man than me. And if I make just a couple of people look up who Richard Feynman is, if they don't know who he is, then that'll be a good thing. Feynman made everything you see here possible in a way. Intel and AMD wouldn't be doing so well without that guy's contribution to modern science. I don't think they'd be building CPUs and microcircuits like what we do and now without the quantum mechanics fundamentals that he's sort of contributed to the world of science. But yes, he's a guy who likes to go off on tangents in discussions. This one guy, an interviewer, just asked him like what he considered to be an ignorant question, and it kind of triggered him a little bit. And he goes off onto like a 10-minute like tirade about all this stuff, and then right at the end, eventually, finally hooked it back in to the original point. And most people would have just been completely lost by how much of a tangent he just went off onto. And yeah, I'm sort of guilty of the same sort of thing. Lots of people are. It's not like a thing, but there's definitely some funny footage of him going off on tangents. Alrighty, so once again we got the Corsair Commander Pro fan and RGB controller. So we're only going to need to hook up a total of 3 fans and RGB devices to this. So we could, if we wanted to, we could go and replace the fans on here with Corsair RGB fans if we wanted to. That would, you get the advantage of having Corsair's superior software to control the lighting effects inside your case. See, the difference that you get with Corsair, right, compared to just like standard run-of-the-mill 5-volt RGB, is that with Corsair they'll allow you to individually address each actual LED that's inside the lighting. So inside the fan rather, or on your strip or on your stick of memory or something like that. So not only can you customize the shit out of everything with that, you can actually layer effects. So for example, if we had like a Corsair LL fan with the 2 rings, the ring on the outside and the ring in the middle there, we could do like in the middle of it, make the middle of it red or orange, and then we could have it the outside like blue or green, and we could have that as our standard like fan design. And then we could put like a raindrop RGB effect that goes over the top of those base colors and that base effect. And you can't really do that level of stuff with many of the others. You can do some stuff with Asus Aura Sync or something like that. They do have some software there. I've honestly had a quick look at it and had a quick play with it. Never really been able to do much with it. I'm sure there's tutorial videos and stuff, but honestly I don't have time to really learn too much about that. The Corsair software is pretty simple in comparison. It still gives a few people a few problems, and yeah, can interfere with other RGB. I am not sure whether that's unintentional or intentional to make you like stick with one ecosystem of RGB type products. I mean, we can go and, well, I'm not going to have that debate with you, but you can go and have that debate and discussion amongst yourselves about whether they actually do stuff like that. The cynical, well, you'll know what the cynical part of me will say, but the less cynical part of me would say that no, it's just a case of you got all these different software like apps that control all the lighting and stuff like that, and eventually one of them is going to try to communicate to its device in a pretty similar way one of the other ones communicates with one of its devices, and then it causes a conflict. Or that's just one little example right there. It should be something like that, but maybe it's not. Alrighty. So we got a little bit of extra stuff to do to this cooler because they do have the Intel plate on the back of it. So we got to be a bit careful because there's pre-applied thermal compound here. And so no, I don't usually bother putting like a different thermal compound on there and stuff like that. We're talking single digits of degrees difference, and it's not worth charging anyone any extra for that unless they specifically request it, you know. So that's just the facts. That's just the facts. It doesn't make a huge amount of difference. And especially the way that normal people use their computers too. Like you could make the argument if you're, you know, trying to overclock and get every little ounce of performance out of the system as possible. You can make the argument that yeah, absolutely, it's worth it. But I can't have a PC enthusiast hat on when I sell PCs and do a consultation with every single customer, because not every single customer is that person, right? Some customers are like, oh no, I don't do any of that. I don't know anything about that. I don't want to know anything about that. All I want is just turn it on and it works and it does all my shit and it's fast and it doesn't fuck up on me. That's all a lot of people care about. So when recommending things for people, that's the sort of criteria that I use. You know, I've got to decide which customer, which person I'm actually talking to. Yeah. No, not at all. You can do it in the BIOS as well. The thing is, with Intel, with the tuning utility, you can set it as a profile, and then you don't have to use those settings all the time. So that's pretty much the only advantage to using XTU. If you want to apply some sort of changes more permanently, and when I say permanently, I mean like, you know, every time you turn the computer on without you opening up XTU, because with XTU, your computer will boot up default. Nothing, it'll just boot up on stock settings, and then you go into XTU and you can apply the profile that you save. Whereas if you go in and do it all from BIOS and you save, that'll save it and that'll be it. So yeah, that's pretty much that's pretty much the only reason why you do it in XTU or BIOS specifically. So XTU is good, like I said, just for those reasons. And I just realised while I've just been talking and carrying on with all this bullshit, I actually needed these stock clips for this cooler. We aren't using a different backplate, so I have to go ahead and put these fucking screws back in. Look at that. Look at that. That's the kind of mistakes that you'll make when your brain is like 1,000 miles away from here, ranting on us about some bullshit.
And colours, and also different viridities as far as here, you've got 85 degrees. That's how far it's been pushed up. So it's pretty much as close to 90 degrees as you can get. As we get a little further through, you've got layers that were more sedimentary, so siltstone and mudstone mixed in with sandstone, and they've actually warped and bent. And you see these curved patterns throughout the layers. It's really something quite cool. And colours, and also
I just put my finger right on the thermopaste there. Good one, Tim. Good one. That's what I wear. Generally pretty baggy shirts and stuff on here. You don't see me getting dressed up to do PCs. Partially and like I always say, these Corsair coolers a little bit fiddly to get mounted there. You can mount them pretty good with just your fingers though. The trick with them is evenly tightening the bolts. So you can't tighten one end like straight away. You've got to actually sort of tighten them down kind of evenly, because if these little clips slide off center slightly, you'll end up just pulling the bolt off the clip. Other manufacturers have like a more of a hard lip around these bolts, and it sort of prevents that from happening. But with these Corsair ones, you got to be careful. I think that's probably because Corsair wants you to mount it with nice even pressure, like what I always crap on about with coolers. It's one way to control for that, right? Now we're looking over here. Yeah, that's pretty good. It's nice and even. Alrighty, that's looking pretty good. Alrighty, so we just got this one big thick cable that plugs directly into our Commander Pro there, and then we have this one little thin cable here which just sends it doesn't actually, because it's only got the one pin there, it doesn't actually like draw any power through that. That cable there just provides like addressability information essentially. So like you can just plug it into the CPU fan header if you've got a CPU cooler on it. None of these fans are going to be plugged into the motherboard. The only fans coming into the motherboard are the ones already in the case there. They'll be hooked up just through a controller, so we'll just have one fan header to plug in and one RGB, and then the USB 2 from the Commander Pro, and that's pretty much it. So it's nice and simple here. And so as for this cable, this can sort of come up the top here to where our CPU power is, and we can sort of route the cable up the back there discreetly. And then we just got our radiator prep here, so it'll be mounted like this in the case. Corsair, unlike some manufacturers, they give you a plate that you can take off, so you can change the direction, so you can have the pipes going whatever way you want, which is a big advantage over some cooler designs. Oh man, a colleague of mine's had a pretty funny situation with a cooler that he shared me today. The pipes on the side come out so far it like obstructs one of the memory slots, and there's the face of the cooler. It has a word, deep cool, and you can't change the direction of it. So if you have the pipes any other way, the word deep cool's not face up. So have fun with that, eh? So yeah, I'm just double checking that I don't do anything stupid like put the freaking fans on the radiator backwards, because obviously it goes without saying that we want the fans for the radiator and all the cabling to sort of stick out the back. We don't want to see any of that when we have it installed in our case. So Corsair actually give you enough bolts to mount fans to both sides of the radiator if you want. So that's what we refer to as a push-pull configuration. And so most people don't do it, but sometimes you might opt for that when you might have, you know, a particularly small case or something like that, and you want to make sure there's definitely plenty of air moving through your radiator. But no, it generally just adds more noise to it. If you want to do that, you can just get really high velocity fans and attach them to your radiator anyway. So, yeah. Oh, this whole question. No, so I don't really have a preference between AMD or Intel. To me, they're sort of both sides, two sides of the same coin. It's like asking me, do you have a favorite, Coles or Woolworths? It's like, oh, I don't really care, man. I go to both of them. Like, I normally go to this one because it's closer. Maybe you'll normally see a certain sort of chip here at a certain price because that's the popular one or whatever. But yeah, as for yeah, I'm not really like a fanboy like that. Certainly not of CPUs, because to me there's just good value CPUs at different prices. So Intel wins some slots, AMD win some slots. Like, you know, it's rare that one will win all of them, you know. So at the moment, the things have flipped on its head from historical averages, and AMD is actually the performance option. It's the more expensive option, and Intel actually has all the price to performance options. So things are flipped on its head when I build. So if you see me building a cheap computer, I'm using Intel. If you're thinking, oh, that's not the cheapest he could be doing, there'd be a cheaper Ryzen chip. No, that's absolutely not true. Absolutely not true. AMD has basically no budget chips on the market right now. Like, the closest thing to a budget CPU that they've got on the market right now that's available, like at a major retailer, right, is something like the 3600X. Sorry, not even the 3600X, just the 3600 non-X, and I think it's like $300. But then for $320, you get a 5600G. So you'd never pick 3600 over 5600G. Like, you just wouldn't do it. Doesn't make any sense. And then if 5600G didn't cut it for you, you really wanted PCIe 4 and all that, then just spend an extra $20 and get 5600X. So AMD doesn't really have any budget options. So if I want to show anyone anything budget, it's all Intel. Intel just wins that category by default because AMD just doesn't have anything in stock. AMD have all their prices and all their chips sort of pretty high. Intel 12th gen, their prices are pretty high because they've got really, really good performance and all that. Where the fuck? I'll find it later. No, I will find it later. Don't know what I've done with the sticky piece that goes on that. Alrighty, so that's all ready to go. We just turn our attention to the case now, get that sorted. Whoa. Break the panel. The easiest way to smooth out this panel, this dust filter I should say, stick it on the back side of the case there. Just leave it there for like 48 hours. And then it won't have the fold in it anymore. I found that's the most effective way to repair them. There's no need to like flatten it out like between books or something to that description. Yeah.
So it was Intel i3 10100F be good for games?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with the 10100F. Like I wouldn't go and pair one with a 3080 or anything like that, you know. But, you know, if you like, what graphics card are you running? If you're running up to like a 3060 Ti, I wouldn't really be too worried about it. Any bottlenecking that's going to occur is only going to occur at really, really high frame rates and stuff like that anyway. And, you know, the sort of frame rates that you're probably not going to be playing at, because if you only got a budget for a 10100, then you probably don't have a massive budget for like a RTX 3080 or something like that. So like if you just go into Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge or Firefox or whatever browser you choose, and just type valid.x86, and it should bring you to the CPU Z. The CPU Z, basically the what's the fucking word for it? The scorecard. The average scorecard of results from verified systems. So you can go and compare where a 10100 sits compared to other CPUs for gaming. So what you'll see is that the 10100, the 10100, the 10100F, 10105F, does all of those sort of 10th gen i3 chips. They're pretty much punching, like trading blows with like 6th and 7th gen i7 chips. So if you wouldn't be concerned about an i7 7600K, I wouldn't really be too concerned about like an i5 10105F or something like that either, because their performance is pretty similar when it comes to gaming and stuff like that. So yeah, nothing wrong with a i3. I've done many i3 builds here. You can see the gaming benchmarks and stuff. It runs games just fine and stuff like that. You don't want to do much more than that, because the limitation is it's just got the 4 cores and 8 threads. And so yeah, I just like to tuck all those cables back there. It's like the only sort of like change I make to the default kind of configuration there. You can also tuck this one in like down behind those SSD trays and just have it discreetly in there. That looks pretty good as well. But I mean, none of it's essential. As you'll know with me, if you've seen a couple of my builds, I don't like to use a lot of cable ties out back. And yeah, there is good reason for it, because if ever you have to change anything, you've got 10,000 cable ties to cut out. And that gets old very, very fast. So you'll do your computer, you know, absolutely perfect and spend an hour on making sure all the cables are all neat and tidy and stuff like that. You'll do it once, and then you'll have a fan that dies, and then I guarantee you'll cut all the cables out, replace the fan, and you won't really feel like going and putting them all back. So the best way to do it is just to keep cables sort of tucked away around the sides and stuff like that. You don't want to, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect back here. You just want it so you don't have to hold the back panel on and put a lot of pressure on just to put the panel back on and stuff like that. It should all just fit pretty neatly in there, but it doesn't have to be freaking a masterpiece back here. That's why there's a back panel on it. That's why they give you all this room back here to do the cable management, so it doesn't have to be all tighter than, I won't even say.
So
Yeah.
this song says 10:30, and then I say, would you build me a PC for 600, because I'm not sure what to get for my budget.
$600, yeah. See, there's the problem. The problem is graphics cards, like decent graphics cards, are still too expensive for that. All right. If we're looking at PCs, you know, under $800, we're talking about, you know, we're talking about a PC for Nana Pop, you know, to go on and check their emails and, you know, go on Facebook and see pictures of the grandkids or something like that. We're not really talking about a gaming PC. We're talking about an i3 or something like that with onboard graphics, and we're only not going to even install a graphics card in it. Because, yeah, like, I mean, difference between wholesale and retail prices, it's not like everything's half price wholesale or something like that. Things are usually only like 3 to 5% cheaper than retail through wholesale, so there's nowhere, when you see those prices like at a major retailer, that's pretty much where it's at. There's not really any extra room to move there when it comes to new parts. Okay, that's the world we live in, unfortunately. I have to turn people away pretty frequently because, yeah, they just didn't realize, well, they just don't realize that, you know, there's no free lunch, and a lot of these websites aren't, you know, they're not charging extortionate margins on things, even though things might seem expensive. And I guess that's the thing with PCs. Some people realize that, and they totally understand where it's at, but a lot of people don't. They seem to have it in their heads that, you know, to be able to get something really, really cheap. And it's yeah, like, I'd love to do it, but like, the thing is with used parts, I've actually got a couple of used PCs right now, but they don't last very long. Like, and I don't, it's pretty much as soon as I get them. Sometimes I don't even get time to take photos of them. Sometimes I've already got someone lined up for it because someone's messaged me going, oh, I want a computer for $900 or something like that, and I'm like, oh, I literally just have one. I'm just about to put it together from used parts. It's going to be $890, and it's like, done. That's gone, and didn't even get listed. You never even saw it on. You never saw it on Marketplace. You never saw it on my Facebook page. You never saw it anywhere, sort of thing.
So,
Yeah.
and that also with the i5 12 600K perform well with NVIDIA 3070.
Yeah, absolutely. Any of the 12 Series K chips are like top tier gaming performance. They beat all the AMD chips on single core performance. So yeah, you don't have to worry. Is the i5 going to be enough or something? If you're asking is the i something going to be enough, you're asking the wrong question. Because i7, i5, i3, they're kind of just meaningless, right? They don't actually. Yeah, those are like customer, you know, like consumer. Sorry, I should say it again. These are like consumer focused brands to help consumers make sense of the product numbers. This is basically the engineers come up with the product numbers, like the 10100, the 10400, the 10600, 10600K, 10600KF. 10700, 10900, they come up with that, and to anyone technical, that's fine. That tells me everything I need to know. I know the difference between a 10100, a 10700, etc. It's really, really, really simple for me to wrap my head around. But the marketing people are like, nah, we can't have that. We got to add in another layer that's probably going to confuse some people more than it helps. And we're going to start calling it I this and blah, 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 because consumers don't know the difference between the model numbers. And that's sort of what it is. The only thing that tells you anything about the chip is the model number and the actual specs of it. What core and thread count does it have? What's its maximum TDP, etc., etc. These are the only things that tell you anything about a CPU, because i3s, basically a new generation i3 will normally beat the previous generation's i7. That's kind of how it scales up. So like if you go and compare an Intel 10700's performance with the performance of the new 12300K the 12100. They don't have a 300K. I thought I saw something that they were going to do that again, but they haven't done i3K series for a while. But yes, you look up 12100 and compare that to like 10th gen Intel i7. Yeah, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And yeah, the i5, I mean, I did one the other night. Yeah.
Are we at that point now where it's best to wait for the upcoming 4000, 7000 series GPUs will keep swaying out on current GPU prices?
Well, see, this depends really on like what your perspective is here, right? Like what people need to understand is from what we understand, 30 series is going to be sold alongside 40 series. Okay? So I don't think, if you think that like 40 series is going to land and then, you know, we'll have like gaming GPUs for, you know, like $100 or something like that, that's never going to happen. Nvidia learned a very dangerous lesson during COVID with 30 series, and the lesson is, as I've said this before here, the lesson is that gamers will indeed pay $3,000-$4,000 to game on a really high-end, souped-up GPU. Sorry, graphics card, I should say. So, I'm not expecting any big price reductions or anything like that when 40 series comes out, because they're still going to keep making a lot of the 30 series cards. There might be some run out deals on certain models and stuff. They might not keep making them all, but I'm pretty sure they're going to keep making some. And if you think that they're going to just start cutting prices, nah man, they've learnt, like I said, they have learnt a dangerous lesson here. Dangerous from the perspective of consumers. And unfortunately, there's nothing that's going to unteach them that lesson, other than people not buying their 40 series, but that's never going to happen, right? So yeah, it's really up to you. If you're in the market, if you want the absolute best of the best of the best of the best of the best, definitely wait for the upcoming cards. But if you're waiting, hoping that like magically once they come in, the whole market will shift and everything will go back to like it's 2012 again, I'm sorry, man. I just can't tell you that that's gonna happen. Like, I know it's what a lot of people want me to say. That's what a lot of people want to hear. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't see it happening, unfortunately. Because, yeah, once again, they learnt a dangerous lesson. Because, you know, in 2015, if you had told them, yep, absolutely, people are going to pay $4,000 for a GPU just because there's shortages of the latest generation graphics card, Nvidia would have been like, yeah, probably not, man. You're probably overstating things a bit. Maybe we can get $2,500. And then, no, you can get $4,000. And yeah, there's no turning back on that, right? Unfortunately. Maybe Radeon will have some sort of a different strat, but I'm sure they've just been sitting there watching the same thing, going, "Yep, we can sell graphics cards for high prices." I mean, look at the price of like the 6900 XT when that first came out, man. AMD or Intel or Nvidia, none of them are your friends. They're not our friends, man. They're not my friend either. Like, they're not our friends. Okay, these are multinational corporations, and even if they've got some good people working there, they'll have a marketing executive who's like, "Nah, not happening under my watch. We're doing it like this." It's the way the world works. Alrighty, so I've installed the cables that we need here onto our PSU, and I've got a bunch here of spare cables. I'm just going to sort of chuck them down right next to where our PSU is going to go. And so we can obviously utilize them if we need to. We could put a more powerful graphics card in this setup for sure. We could easily put an RTX 3080 in here probably. I don't foresee too many issues with that. Yeah, got a Ryzen 7, but it's not gonna. I don't think it's gonna use much more than like 120, 130 watts absolute max. So you got the motherboard and RGB and the cooler and stuff like that. Can probably add another 170 watts there, and then for a 3080, most of them use 350 to 400 watts absolute maximum. So we would still have enough juice for that on this with this 750 watt power supply. And you can check that out in a power supply calculator as well. The thing is, with your power supply, you generally want to stay at that like around the 80-90%, because usually the efficiency of the power supply starts to taper off by then, and so that's a big deal. So a lot of people don't realize that when you've got a power supply that's putting out, like, say it's putting out 850 watts, it might actually be drawing more wattage than that through the wall of your house, because the power supply is converting AC power out of your wall to DC power. And so that's what this 80 plus stuff is, bronze, gold, etc., etc. So all that's telling you is how efficient it is at certain percentage loads that the power supply is being tested at. So it's not a guide to quality or anything like that, but it's a guide to efficiency. And so if you look into this and you look into the maths and stuff involved, you'll see that there are sort of points where there's a point where the efficiency of a power supply will start to taper off. And what the 80 plus rating guarantees is at particular loads, you're guaranteed a certain amount of efficiency. And so if it's gold, they're guaranteeing 90% efficiency. If it's bronze, they're guaranteeing, I think is it 85, or is it something weird like 87? It's one of the two. 80 plus normal is just 80% efficient at those wattages tested, which is fine for most people, and it's fine for like your average person's gaming computer. You know, average person might not actually game every day. They might only have time to game a few days a week, right? And they might not have time to game for a full 8 hours a day or something like that. So if the power supply is a little bit less efficient, it doesn't really make any difference to the power bill at the end of the quarter for that customer. They're not going to notice anything. If you've got your computer on all the time and you're using it under load, then yeah, it becomes more of an important type of thing to consider. It's important when you've got, like, if you've got an office with like 20 different computers and they're all going to be on pretty much all the time. Yeah, that's going to be a real thing to consider, is how efficient it is, how much wattage is going to be coming out of the wall that you're going to be paying for from your power company, and how much of it is being used by the computers that you're trying to run. So it becomes more of a thing when you've got a whole heap of computers and they're running all the time and stuff like that. When it's not, when it's just the one, it's less important. Alrighty, so we will need our IO shield for this board. That's the only thing this board doesn't have. And it's not that MSI hasn't thought about it, it's just that they've done one with slightly better looking heat sinks and stuff on the board, and they call it the mortar, and that's like an extra $50 more than this one, but it's basically the same board with like different bling on it and a built-in IO shield. See, they know what they're doing. It's the marketing guys. Blame the marketing guys. Always blame the marketing guys.
Tim,
Yeah.
you know, since I've got $1,500 dues right here, I'm willing to place in your sweaty palm. If you can get me an MSI GeForce RTX 3080 12GB Supreme X video card.
Oh god. Oh dude, I probably can't. It'd probably be, yeah, it'd be more than that, I'd say. I mean, let me have a look, but like I was saying earlier, you know, I don't have access to pricing that is like that much cheaper than what you would see at major retailers and stuff like that. Certainly not for individual parts. Like if I just wanted a graphics card on its own, for example, they'll be like, oh yeah, we'll do your deal. You got to take 50 of these graphics cards. Yeah, I'm just gonna, you know, fork out $50,000 on graphics cards and just bring them back to my house. Yeah, no, it's not happening. No way. Everyone wants a slightly different graphics card and stuff like that. I don't like taking bulk deals like that, unless it's something that's really freaking generic and that I use all the time. I don't like being stuck with like all these random coolers, random motherboards, stuff like that, because people have like, they've got different opinions about exactly what board they want and stuff like that, and I don't want to ever be in a situation where I've got 50 of these fucking random motherboards that I've got to get rid of, if not I lose thousands of dollars. And then I've got to palm off shit to my customers. Like I got this review from someone, right, on Facebook. I'd never engaged them. It's like basically accusing me of selling, what do you say, selling bad quality parts at inflated prices or something like that, and all this shit. And I'm just like looking to myself, I'm like, yeah, that's not what I do, sort of thing. But anyway, alright, that should just stay there for now. Okay, where are we? So I'm just plugging in the CPU power cable. because once we get the cooler in place, it becomes freaking painful. And we've also got to slide that fan down a little bit as well.
Tim,
Yeah.
so I want to know if I buy a Ryzen 5600G and later on when I want to upgrade and buy a graphics card and a new CPU or not.
No, I use, you can see plenty of examples of 5600G paired with graphics cards on my page. That was not an uncommon configuration there for quite a while, because we were in a situation where I could pick up like 5600G for like what was it? It was nearly $100 cheaper than 5600X. So I really couldn't make the argument to people to spend more than $100 on something that's like only like 5% better, you know, on the CPU. And that's not like, when I say the CPU is 5% better, that doesn't mean your gaming FPS is going to be 5% better. The CPU is a secondary consideration of gaming performance. The main thing that matters is the graphics card. So when I say, oh, there's like 5% difference in the CPUs for gaming, that's like maybe a frame per second difference in an actual game. The main thing that's going to be bottlenecking you will be your graphics card. And yeah, I feel like I'm repeating myself when I say things like this, and part of me feels like I'm patronizing people by saying this, but like, there is always a bottleneck in your system. You will always have a bottleneck, okay? Where that bottleneck is, that is what matters. Okay, you don't want your CPU to be the bottleneck. You don't want your memory to be the bottleneck. You don't want your storage to be the bottleneck. And it essentially, a storage can be your bottleneck if it's preventing you from installing or updating your software, like games and stuff. But yes, everyone has a bottleneck. Some people like get really concerned. They're like, oh, will this bottleneck this or this? And I'm just like, oh man, just chill, It's all good. Like, yes, like everything that there will be a bottleneck somewhere, okay? And the bottleneck can change when you're doing different things, okay? So you might not have a CPU bottleneck until you get your i3 trying to run like 300 frames a second with a 3080. Then you might start seeing a slight bottleneck compared to if you had a faster CPU in there. But it's not going to be a severe one. A severe bottleneck would be a situation where while you're gaming, your CPU is at 100% usage and your graphics card can barely get over 50-60% utilization. That's what a bad bottleneck looks like with the CPU. If you're running games and you're seeing your graphics card at like 99% and up to 99-100% utilization, then you're not being CPU bottlenecked in that situation, because your graphics card's running it as fast as it can and the CPU's keeping up. When the CPU starts getting up towards 100% usage, you'll see the graphics card usage will be dropping below that 99% plus sort of scenario, and that's when you've got a CPU bottleneck. So you might not have a CPU bottleneck at 60 frames a second, but you might have a CPU bottleneck at trying to run 300 frames a second. So yeah, it's a little bit I guess it's a little bit complicated to get your head around, but basically that's about as simple as I can put it, right? Okay, so pretty simple really. We've just got our ATX power for the motherboard, our graphics card power cable, we've got 2 SATA data cables to plug in, plus our hard drive. These are our fans and RGB that'll go to the Commander Pro. So our SATA cable, we can just plug that in to our hard drive there. And so yeah, just coming out of our hard drive there, we've just got the 3 other SATA ports there that we can use. So I'll go ahead and plug in one here for the controller. We can just tuck that back there, and then we'll just have this one cable coming up to our Commander Pro. But we'll probably be able to tuck it all the way with those other cables there, because we've got a bit of length in the actual SATA cable that comes off here. So we'll be able to tuck it all the way with those spare cables. But what did I do with the No? That's okay. I can use some spare ones here, and these ones are probably even better. These are magnetic ones. So we can fix them to the bottom there, and then that just sticks in with a magnet there. How cool is that? Not very cool? Okay. Alright, sure. No worries. Just crush my dreams. It's okay. I'm a big kid. There we go. And so we just got a USB 2. It's got to go down. Oh. This has just got to go around here. What's up?
Oh, Fiona says I need to turn up my mic. I don't even have it on. He says it sounds like I'm at the neighbour's house.
Sounds like she's at the neighbour's house. Speak up, babe. I speak louder than you. I speak probably...
Yeah, but you're on the other side of the room.
I know. But like in normal volume, I speak several decibels louder than you.
Yeah, you do.
You're pretty soft spoken unless you're really angry. Then you're not soft spoken. She gives me anxiety when she gets that angry. Anyone else's angry missus give them anxiety? I can't be the only man whose missus gives them anxiety when they get real fucking angry. Alright, so I'm just going to feed this cable here. For our front panel audio. Just going to tuck that one behind the motherboard there. And we have a USB 2 for our Commander Pro. And so now you can just run your cables up through here, but I route them behind the board there just so it looks nice and clean there on the bottom. Because sometimes you're like, oh yeah, it doesn't bother me, and then like 3 months later you're like, oh, it kind of bothers me. I hate seeing all those cables there. But you won't have that. You won't have that problem with this PC. And so yeah, you might be going, oh, is it safe to route the cables behind the back of the board? Yeah, it is, because the board has the offsets there, and we're talking about really thin little cables. And sometimes you might see, like when I'm feeding them through, they might like get caught and stuff like that. It's nothing to worry about as long as you're not rough with it and trying to yank your cables through there or something stupid like that. If you're gentle and stuff like that, if you're feeding the cable through and it gets caught on something, just pull it back a little bit, just lightly, and then just try again. You'll get it through there. But yes, this is the secret to a neat micro ATX case a micro ATX board in a full size ATX case. Because the downside with that is, if you've got the full size ATX board, you can use these holes here and you don't see any cable, you just see the same thing as what I've done at the bottom there. You just see a tiny little bit of cable just plugged into the header, which is completely fine. It doesn't bother pretty much anyone. Alrighty, and then our freaking USB 3 is always a real pain in the ass cable to get in place. So big, long, and chunky, but the good thing about this board is it has this horizontally orientated USB 3, so you can plug it in like that instead of having this big cable coming in from somewhere on the board. It can just sort of be plugged in like that, nice and discreet. And before I forget, we need one SATA cable from the hard drive. And so it's not being plugged into the hard drive just yet. But we'll plug it into the motherboard, and the graphics card's actually going to conceal that cable, so we're not going to see that one there anyway. We'll see part of that one. Alrighty, so we're pretty much just left with the RGB and PWM header for our controller here. the built-in one with our case. Alright, so these, we can just feed these through at the top. Because right at the top here we've got 2, 3 headers. I hate these 3 pins. Oh my god, this makes me want to fucking like just use all my strength and force the fucker on there. Okay, it's fucking done. And then the much easier one . Okay, so like I said, normally easier to stick down the cooler at the end, but in this case, we got magnets. How cool is that? Corsair should include magnets. Are you listening, Corsair? Probably not. So yeah, one quirk with these Corsair controllers is you need to plug them in order. It says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Plug them in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Alright, so we can just bunch these cables together and they can just be left around the side there. So this is cable tie number 2 at the back here, just to keep this group of fan and RGB cables with our cooler together. And we can tuck them up here in the corner out of the way. Our USB 3 sits there, got our SATA cable to install. Sweet as! So we've got our motherboard power cable, that will just come in through here. Okay, we've got everything sort of in place. There's no random cables that we need to route behind the board discreetly. So I'll go ahead and put in a few more bolts. You right, babe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also stuff like over the years that you need to keep your wife as happy as possible because they're in charge of the hairy checkbook.
Well, they do say happy wife, happy life, right? Okay, so everything's all looking pretty good here. I think it's time that we do something with that graphics card that I've got sitting there eyeing me off on the floor. Alrighty. And no other sticky anywhere. It's always nice. And we've got slots 1 and 2 to deal with here. And see, one of the nice things about this case is it's got all real panels on the back here. None of those ones that you got to snap out of place or anything like that. They've gone to the small amount of effort. Yeah.
What's the HDMI display port ratio on that?
So it'll be 3 to 1, I think. No, it's sorry, it's 2 on this card.
Yeah. Just
I mean, if I wanted to run 3 DisplayPort feeds, I'd spend a little bit more on the graphics card, right? There you go, you bastard. Alrighty. So finally, we just got one cable to go for our graphics card. And that can probably just go out Going from up here. Let's put one more cable tie around that spare PCIe connector on this cable so it's not just flapping there in the wind. You know what I found out when I travelled around Australia? I found out that people from Queensland and people who speak like how I do have the most Australian accents in the whole country. I didn't know that until it became very apparent in WA. And my friends in WA were like, "Whoa, you sound so Australian." I'm like, what? What are you talking about? I'm just from fucking Brisbane, man. If you asked me where was like the most Australian place in Australia, I'd tell you it's like freaking like somewhere that like sounds real Aussie, like I don't know, Yarrawonga, Victoria, or Cunnamulla, or there's plenty of them. Something like that. Something that sounds more Australian. But yeah, I don't know if other people on the East Coast notice that about Queenslanders or something like that, or it's just something that becomes apparent to our friends on the West Coast. Not sure. Actually, I'm just going to leave that up there because I still have to plug in that hard drive. It's one of the quirks of installing Windows 10 onto an M2 SSD when you have a SATA device installed. Has a nasty habit of putting boot manager on whatever's in the drive 0 position, which is always conveniently going to be whatever SATA devices you have plugged in. So even if you select that you want Windows to install on your M2 SSD, if you have a SATA device plugged in and it's in the drive 0 position, boot manager will end up on the drive 0 drive and not on the drive that you're installing the rest of Windows on. Sounds stupid, but yeah, it does that, and that's why I plug in the SATA devices at the end after I've got Windows started. Alright, so I'm going to need a Windows USB. I'm going to need a power cable, and I'm going to need my HDMI cable as well. Okay. Alrighty. It's a good sign. I'll get Christine to share the screen. So you always got to give it a little bit the first time it boots up. The motherboard and CPU are talking to each other and they're saving a few things in. It's all happening automatically. There was once upon a time where you'd have to like manually like key in all your devices when you turn the computer on for the first time. Luckily, they automatically have an auto detect thing that runs. It just takes a little bit, so that's why whenever you turn a computer on for the first time or make some big hardware changes, it'll reset and run that compatibility thing where it redetects all the devices connected to it. Anyway, we do have one other thing to do here quickly, just to make sure that this PC will be compatible with Windows 11 if the customer wants to upgrade. So I'm still installing and recommending people stay on Windows 10 for now, but I'm also making sure that people's computers are ready to go for Windows 11 when that time comes. So the last thing I want is to have to make it like a special video on how to make your computer compatible with Windows 11, because it involves playing around here in BIOS, and most people don't want to do that sort of stuff. Most people, doing things outside of Windows gives them anxiety, and that makes sense, because general advice is don't touch things you don't understand. So if you don't understand any of this, you don't touch it, then you don't touch it, you have no idea about it. And then when you have no idea about it, it gives you anxiety. And so once again, after a BIOS update, it's basically like we're turning on the computer again for the first time. Okay, so there's our 2TB SSD. There's my SSD that's plugged in by USB. Now that we've gone ahead and done that, there we go. Got that SATA cable plugged in for our hard drive. And that panel slides on the back there nice and easily. Oh my god. All right. Oh. I love how they try to make you think that this is somehow inferior. Continue with limited setup. I don't think my setup's limited. Just saying. Alrighty. Let's plug some internet in. Alright. Tidy things up a bit there. I'm a bit of a minimalist. That's the thing with computer, you can always do it your way. I just set up a pretty good generic kind of system here. You can use it or you don't have to use it. Personally, I hate programs on my desktop. I like my desktop to be files and things that I'm actually working on and stuff like that. That way I can always see, you know, what stuff I've got to do. And then I like to file things away properly in folders. So I always make this applications folder to just drag all the applications when you install all your stuff, and the games once again for all the games. And that's pretty good for most people, so I just sort of do that for everyone. You don't have to use the file system if you don't want. You can delete it all and do it your way. Okay, so don't need any of that. No. I can put Ryzen Master on there. It's a newer version, I think.
Tim,
Yeah.
can we trade in that rice cooker for this one?
It doesn't look like a very serious rice cooker, babe. We have a very serious rice cooker right now. You want to show people our serious rice cooker?
You really want me to?
Kinda. Because I think people probably want to see it at this stage because I fucking spoke about it.
Why don't you get up and do it?
Fucking doing stuff. You're just fucking around on Facebook.
I'm very serious.
Origin doesn't want to install yet. surface. Nearly there. Alright, I'm going to quickly set up MSI Afterburner right now, plus our on-screen overlay. Alright.
わかるの。今までの戦いとは違う。
Do I need to do any CPU wizardry to make it behave? Oh no, this is AMD, so that won't happen. Sorry, Intel fans. 12th gen i9 needs tuning for productivity. Okay for gaming, but yeah, it might kind of melt.
仲間が命をかけて私を守る。
There's a new Sailor Moon movie coming out soon.
Oh god.
Yay! Oh, I'm so keen. You're taking me to movies too. You just died a little bit inside it before that, didn't you?
I'm not saying anything. Okay, so while we're waiting for MSI Center, let's set up our hard drive. Oh, thanks a lot. What? There we go. There's our hard drive. Alright, let's turn off annoying shit that's going to start up automatically. That's okay, that's okay. No. No. Come on. Adjust the date and time. Brisbane. Sweet. Sweet as. Okay. Barely chewing any power, look at that. And it's 6100. We'll run a quick bench on it. .640 and 611, 11.16. Okay, so there's our CPU hierarchy. So basically getting, Ryzen 9 performance there, on par with a 5800X without the massive temperatures, I would assume. Yeah, let's have a look at multi. How does it stack up? Well, that's not a fair comparison. None of them are fair comparisons to this. These are all 8 core 16 threads. These have different core and thread counts, so they're not exact comparisons. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. For the price and everything. Alright, let's run some gaming benchmarks. Let's run Heaven here, high, no anti-aliasing. Okay, so that was heaven there on the like out of the box settings, high with no anti-aliasing. This is at 1080p. And this one here, Valley, this is a more demanding benchmark. We're on this one on Ultra, max anti-aliasing. Alrighty, so that was Valley there on Ultra with max anti-aliasing. And the final one we do is just this 4K optimized one. Not that you'd really want to game at 4K with a 3060, but they'll give you some idea. Alrighty. So on to the final part of our night now. Try to take over from Christine. Sweet. So we set this up for a 90-minute run. Alrighty. So let's see how she goes. Oh, I'm not seeing any issues. Certainly not at the out of the box settings. Look at that, 58 degrees, that's nothing. The graphics card's not even at 60 degrees either. Yep, this system won't have any problems with thermals. I can tell you already, I almost don't have to run the stress test, but I'll still let it run just to make sure that, you know, there's no like hardware that's just going to die after the first time you use it. That's a pain in the ass, right? So we just hit 60.1 degrees on the CPU. Yeah, not going to be an issue. This is a very well behaved CPU. He's only getting to 4.1, but you could play around with that. There's definitely some headroom there. Alrighty. Well, I think that's pretty much it for the night. I'm getting pretty tired. I'm ready to have some dinner and actually go to bed. I'm keen to watch a little bit of Better Call Saul. I'm trying to re-watch the whole thing from the start in preparation for the new season that's coming out soon. So I want to refresh myself on that. So I'm going to make myself some toast, get myself something to eat other than that, and go lie down and watch a bit of Better Call Saul and go to sleep. So I hope you all have a good night. But we'll be back tomorrow. We've got another 3060 Ti rig on tomorrow, so be sure to check that one out. But until then, thank you all for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you all in the next video.